And now, turning to our program, please welcome Jamie Reeve to introduce our speaker. All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, but before I do, I'm going to introduce his predecessor. Jane Blain Gilbertson, third generation owner and CEO, recently retired CEO of Blain Supply. Jane, please say hello. She made it in from Janesville today with a couple others, and Mark, so thanks very much for bringing today's speaker. So we talked about culture. We heard about culture eating strategy for lunch, and you're going to hear more about that. But close your eyes real quick. When you hear the words farm and fleet, and you have the color orange, you've got the wrong image, all right? We're talking about the good guys, the family-owned team of Blain's Farm and Fleet today. We're going to meet its new leader, Mark Hasting. Mark has lived in Janesville for the last 6 years, where he had a series of increased responsibilities. Before joining Blain's, though, he's had experiences at Come and Go, at MyEyeDoctor.com, Starbucks, and Target, so you know he's had retail experience to the nth degree. He and his wife, Cheryl, allegedly met in high school. You both were in high school when you met, correct? Yes, that's what I understand. You both met in high school. He's from Tulsa, Oklahoma. He's a proud Oklahoma State Cowboy, despite his footwear today. And they have 3 children together whom they're raising in Janesville. And an interesting fact about him, he doesn't karaoke much. In fact, he's only done it once. And the song he chose was Kevin Mullaney's wedding song, the power ballad by the 90s hair band Poison, Every Rose Has Its Thorn. So everyone, give it up for Mark Hasting.
That was Jamie's mic drop moment right there. I think I had adult beverages the night I sang that song, and thank goodness everyone else had adult beverages. They didn't remember. Hey, I know the fastest way to anybody's heart is through their stomach, so we put some snacks on everybody's table. This is our own brand of snack. There's lots of different varieties and flavors, so I hope you partake. Take some home to your family as well if you have family at home. If not, eat alone, I suppose. Hey, I just want to start by saying thank you to every single member of the Rotary Club here. This is a 110-year-old organization, and the work that you've done in Milwaukee and across greater Wisconsin is absolutely incredible. And I think there's something on your webpage that says, what happens when you match dreamers with doers? You get a really great place to live and thrive. And I think that's such a powerful statement, and I just want a round of applause for you guys. All right, so I gotta move these. This is a job I normally don't do, is move my own slides, but I'm gonna do my best today. I wanna start with a question, and I need your honest answer on this one. And here's the question. How many of you have heard the story that Farm and Fleet and Fleet Farm were started by 2 brothers in the same family? A lot of hands going up. What if I were to tell you that Jane and I are on a mission to change that opinion because it wasn't started by the same family? So I want to tell you the real story. Bert and Claude Blain grew up in Ladysmith, Wisconsin. This is a small town up in northern Wisconsin by the Flambeau River and by Weyerhaeuser. Maybe you've heard of it. Their parents were in the milling business. During the Depression, a lot of the families and neighbors that they took care of back in those days started to have real challenges with their business, their farm, their property. And the Blain's family, particularly Bert and Claude, saw the banks come in and take back what they weren't paying on. This put a pretty significant distrust in the banking system. And so for many, many years, they were going to do everything they possibly could to just pay cash for everything and not have any debt. In the 40s, Blain volunteered to go into World War II. He was there for 4.5 years, and I just find it very fitting that we happen to be at the War Memorial today because of his dedication to this great country. When he got back from World War II, he and Claude had this entrepreneurial spirit. They had a couple of car dealerships, Chevy dealerships up north in Ladysmith and the surrounding areas. And when they could, they would get some merchandise or maybe a carload of potatoes and bring it to their dealership and sell them. And as a guy who's been in retail for his entire adult life, if you love retail, you never want to leave it. And I think Bert and Claude loved retail. Bert and Claude wanted to start a merchandising business, general merchandise business. The problem was, in the 40s and the 50s, it was against federal law to sell anything at a discounted price. This is prior to Target, prior to Walmart, prior to Kmart. They had been talking to their Napa distributor about this desire, and interestingly enough, the Napa distributor said, I know of a couple in North Dakota who have figured out a workaround. So they drive, Bert and Claude drive to North Dakota to meet with this couple. The couple tells them that if a family has 5 engines or more, then they are a business owner, they're a fleet. And selling to a fleet is not technically selling to the general public. It's a business-to-business proposition. So, voila, here's the workaround, and they were pretty excited. Most people at the time had 5 engines. You'd have a car, a tractor, you had maybe a tiller, maybe you had a lawnmower, and then just pick one more thing. And Jane would say it wasn't like a hard and fast rule. It was just like, okay, yeah, that's close. You get your membership card. When they were in the car dealership business, they knew the Mill family. And the Mills family also in the car business up in the Northeast, and they shared with the Mills family about their experience with this couple in North Dakota. So in 1955, they knew they wanted to open a retail store, but they weren't sure where they were going to do it. So off they go looking for the right location, and sure enough, they found it in Janesville, Wisconsin. So what you see here in this red little box was our first storefront. The Blain's brothers opened this store in July of 1955. The Mills brothers, after spending time with this same couple, opened their first store, I think in September of 1955. So we proudly own, we are the first discount store in the state of Wisconsin, and there's no denial for that. The Mills brothers' first storefront was bannered not at Fleet Farm, but it was Fleet Wholesale Supply. Doesn't roll off the tongue, does it? So for the first 5 years of them running this business, they lived in Ladysmith, Wisconsin, and they would take turns driving from Ladysmith to Janesville, and they would do it in 3-week intervals. They opened a few more stores, some in Illinois, some still in Wisconsin, and once they determined that they had a viable business, they decided that indeed, we're gonna sell the dealerships and we're gonna move the family to Janesville, which they did. I always thought it was just Ville. And when Jane was born there, I thought they named it Janesville. But apparently, in doing a lot of research, that is not accurate. About 2 years after the Farm and Fleet opened and Fleet Wholesale Supply, Stu and Henry Mills came to Bert and Claude and asked if they could make a name change. They wanted to change their name from Fleet Wholesale Supply to Fleet Farm. At the time, They were good friends. They had no idea they were going to grow to the size, or we were going to grow to the size that we are today. And they said yes. Later in life, Bert shared with Jane and Robert, her brother, that was the worst decision that they ever made. Now take a look at the photo. On the left, we were pretty small. Our storefronts are maybe 1,000 square feet. Today, if you look on the right, we have a very modern approach to retail. Our stores average about 106,000 square feet. We have side lots where we sell farm implements, gates, fencing, mats for your cattle or your horses, hay, all kinds of things. We also have a legit drive-through. A fun story that Jane likes to tell is long before COVID, we had an idea to do drive-throughs, and one of our associates said, we should put a register back there because sometimes people come through the drive-through and they want to add to their order. So Jane said, that's a great idea. Put registers back there, and she started punching holes in the side of our building. So if you've not been to one of our drive-throughs, it literally is like a fast food restaurant. And we process very quickly. If you order BOPUS, buy online, pick up in store, we will have your order ready within an hour. Most times it's within 30 minutes, which is very, very convenient, particularly in today's environment. So when COVID hit, and we weren't really sure if we could operate stores inside, our BOPUS became absolutely critical. While other retailers were trying to figure this out, we were well ahead of that game. And we had lines that went literally for a mile of cars. Now the sad thing is, inside the cars, oftentimes they would social distance. So that made the line a little bit longer. Didn't need to social distance cars back then, but we didn't know. All right, the Blain's family and the Mills family, like I said, were very close. Understand that they often spent Thanksgiving together. Jane shares stories where she learned how to water ski behind Stu's boat on the lake that they lived on. And it was a handshake deal. A lot of the deals done back in the 50s and 60s were really handshake deals. And that handshake deal lasted for about 61 years. Today, Blain's continues to be a family-owned business. We're in our second generation with Jane. She's the daughter of Bert. And both of her daughters also work for us. Sarah in the buying office, and Nicole works with us in project management. And I am truly honored and humbled to be the first CEO or leader that's a non-family member. We're based in Janesville, Wisconsin. We have 45 stores and about 5,500 associates. Now here's an interesting fact. Yes, we're based in Janesville, Wisconsin, but we have more stores in Illinois than we do Wisconsin. The last 2 stores we opened, though, are Wisconsin-based. Grafton, someone was back here talking about Grafton, and Rhinelander, 2 great stores for us. And for the record, the Mills family stew in particular sold to KKR in 2016. At the time, KKR called Jane and asked Jane if she'd be interested in selling. Jane is a smart businesswoman and certainly was curious about that opportunity and did a lot of research on her own, partnered with some very, very smart individuals who could give her some knowledge. But she made the decision that she wanted to stay family-owned. KKR didn't like that response at all. And they felt like those were fighting words, and they started building stores in southern Wisconsin. So that handshake deal was now gone. They built some stores in eastern Iowa and really, really close to our home base in Janesville. They told Jane, we're gonna kill you. Not literally kill you, DA right over here, but take you out. And Jane said, the hell you are. And her management team at that time, some 10 years ago, decided we're gonna put a blunting strategy together. And they did. And a big part of the blunting strategy was understanding why Blain's was different, how we could show up in a differentiated way every single day. Our differentiation is our people. In my opinion, it's the only true differentiator that's out there for businesses today. Everything else can be replicated, but not your people. Our vendors tell us this, our neighbors tell us this, and I think when you go into our stores, there's a vibe, there's an energy that is not present in any other retailer today. You might be asking, how the heck did you do this? Well, it takes a lot of intentionality. We over-index with full-time associates. Most big box retailers, get this, have about a 30-70 split. 30% full-time, 70% part-time. We remain 55 full-time, 45 part-time. And that's expensive proposition because of all the benefits, et cetera, but it's a huge benefit to our neighbors who come in and shop us on a regular basis. About 4 years ago, we invested in a tool that was a task management tool. What we were looking for was a way that our store associates could communicate back to us when they've done a certain task. We could communicate to the associate that we need a certain task done. Just pretend that this item is potentially not sellable anymore. We need to pull it off the floor. Well, you need to have some validation that these have been pulled off the floor. What we got with Zipline was far greater than what we would have ever imagined. It became a powerful, powerful tool for our associates, and it was their own little social media tool. They would take pictures of displays or how well they folded the denim that night, or maybe they would talk to a customer and share a customer experience hero story, and they would get likes. They would take pictures of the pets that would come into the stores, and sometimes our pets are not just dogs or cats. Jane and I have had the opportunity to hold roosters, pigs, snakes, I don't like to hold those, other things like that. But people bring in exotic animals as well. But Zipline has been far greater than anything we would have ever imagined that it would be. And then one more element. We spend an incredible amount of money on training. Every year we have seminars. And the seminar might be for plumbing, it might be for hardware, it might be for ag, it might be for sporting goods. And we bring the assistant manager who has that responsibility, and we bring the department heads from all 45 stores. We have our vendors that work with us in those particular areas, and they set up booths around our conference center. And our teams have a great opportunity to see what's new and exciting, and we build their capabilities so when our neighbors come in and ask them those difficult questions, they have the confidence to answer them. We're very proud that for 7 years in a row, we were named on Forbes' list as one of the best employers in America. So this investment back into our teams, it pays off because our teams feel like they can do their job without a lot of assistance. I very much firmly believe that when you invest in your associates and take care of them, they're going to take care of the customer, and the customer is going to take care of us, the business. And that has been true to this day. Now, while I love to speak about Blain's, and we'll probably have some Q&A about it, I wanted to spend a few minutes to share sort of my journey, how I got to Blain's. I began my retail career at Target in 1988. I worked my way up from a department manager to vice president of store operations, where I was in charge of operations for all 1,700 stores. At Target, you learn a lot of great things. You learn a lot about leadership competencies. You learn a lot about merchandising and presentation. And you learn about process. After 21 years, I decided it was time for me to do something different. I had some friends that had gone to Starbucks. Howard Schultz had just come back to Starbucks in 2008. In 2009, I joined him to help turn that around. What I immediately found is the difference between customer service at Target and customer experience at Starbucks. At Target, customer service meant I was in stock. I had clean aisles. I had enough cashiers to take care of the customers when they were ready to check out, and I was priced right. But when I got to Target, it was about the human connection, not about process. They wanted to make sure you knew their name. I had baristas that knew 300 or 400 or 500 of their customers' names, and they knew exactly what their beverage of choice was. If you didn't show up on Monday, Jamie, they would say, "Where were you yesterday?" And you'd say, "Well, I had this." No, no, no. You got to come in every day, Jamie. And they guilt you in to come in every day. But they loved you for that. But even these iconic brands, Starbucks, Target, they make mistakes. And where I'd say Target made its mistake was they put too much process in things. They took out the ability for our associates in stores, our team members in stores, to make decisions and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And as these individuals promoted up into new roles, we found that they hadn't made decisions, critical decisions in the past, and greater mistakes were being identified. At Starbucks, it was all about the third place. If you've ever read any of Howard Schultz's books, it was all about the human connection. Starbucks decided that throughput or speed was really something important. They were kind of entering in the drive-through space. And so above the drive-through window, they put this LED screen that had images of cars. And the cars would be green or they would be red. Red's bad. What is the barista now concerned about? The one thing that their boss is harping on them. You gotta go faster. So what happened to the cafe? It wasn't important anymore. That wasn't being measured. And I think it lost its way. And I'm not saying that you can't get it back. I'm just saying it's really, really challenging to get it back. And you see both companies have new CEOs and they're trying to get that mojo back, but it's gonna take some time. And that leads me to this slide. I want you to go back and think about your high school days. Did you ever have to read any Shakespeare? Anybody? A few of us. I don't think they do that anymore. If you read Hamlet, there's a great line in Hamlet from our friend William Shakespeare, and it says, "We know what we are. We know not what we will become." We know what we are. We know not what we will become. Every one of us in this room have had a storied career. But I bet you when you were in high school, you didn't quite know what you would become. But you probably had someone in your life who was your inspiration, who helped guide you, who gave you the confidence to do more than what you thought you could do. For me, it was my granddad. My granddad on my mom's side was young. He was 45 when I was born. He and I hung out. We were peanut butter and jelly. And we spent a lot of time in his garage over the years. Now, my granddad was an IBMer his whole career. Started when he got out of college at Arkansas Tech and never left. What's the motto of IBM? It's one word: think. When I was old enough to go to my granddad's office in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I'd sit in a chair and he'd let me sit into some of his meetings that he had. And on his desk was a rock about yay big, and it was kind of like a river rock. And it said, "Think," on that rock. And I would just sit there and wonder, like, what does that mean? How am I thinking? Am I thinking hard enough? When I turned 16, I bought a 1973 MGB. Now, if anybody knows what an MGB is, it's a British car that breaks down a lot. But it was cute, and I could get dates, thus the girlfriend who became my wife. Yep. Well, it broke down a lot, and my granddad and I decided we're going to rebuild this engine, we're going to build it better. Well, that's easy say and a hard do, and oftentimes things didn't work out. You would start the engine and there'd be a big knock, turn it off. He would go inside. And he would say, "Mark, you got a problem to solve. See that cabinet over there?" And he had a big blue tool cabinet in his garage that he had stenciled in the word "think." The I, which separated the two doors, stands for inside. The solutions to your problem are inside your toolbox. Now, as I became older, I realized inside this toolbox as well, not just the physical tools, but the mental tools. This stuck with me for a long, long time. But as you can imagine, as we get older, it's harder and harder, and as we get more responsibilities, let's just say at work, you have family obligations, you maybe want to try to take care of yourself and do a workout once in a while, you want to try to remain, spiritually right. These demands take the most precious thing we have away, and that's time. Time to think. I recently got my hands on a book, and it's called A Minute to Think. This is a very interesting read if you haven't seen this book. So it's by Juliet Funt, F-U-N-T. Now that name, for some of us who are older, might ring a bell a little bit, because her dad was the famed Alan Funt, who used to host Candid Camera. So Juliet Funt, she tells a great story in this book that she was raised in a high-rise building, and she was very, very good at trick-or-treating in high-rise buildings. But had she had to go into a regular neighborhood to trick-or-treat, she had no idea what it was. So fast forward several years, and she becomes a consultant to help people eliminate clutter, get organized, use their time more wisely. She marries, has 3 boys. The husband says, I think we should take the boys to the Catskill Mountains and go camping. So she compromises and said, how about a cabin in the Catskill Mountains? So they go to a cabin, and if you've ever been to an Airbnb, there's usually a piece of paper that sort of like, here's all the instructions. And on that piece of paper, she saw something that said, if you need help starting a fire, call this number. She's like, I don't need help. So the boys were eager to make s'mores. So they wanted to get a campfire going. Out to the back they go. The husband, for some reason, had to go into town. And so she's stuck building this fire. And she tries and she tries and she tries with her little boys, and they don't get a fire started. So she goes inside and she calls that number. She says, a man named George shows up in like 5 minutes. He must have been watching us, she says. And George says, all right, kids, I want to see how you put this fire together. So they put these logs together, and they try to start it. And they try it again, and he says, look, guys, 3 things that fire needs. Number 1, it needs kindling to start. It needs a flame. And the 3rd thing is it needs some oxygen. And you guys are smothering it. You're not giving it oxygen. He said, just like you guys need oxygen to breathe. And Juliet Funt has a light bulb moment. Think about us as executives. And we're burning the candle on both ends. And we're trying to make sure that we're doing all the right things with all these obligations and responsibilities that we have. But we don't give ourselves enough oxygen sometimes. So her whole bias in this book is you got to remove the clutter. If you're back to back to back, find those meetings where you're not getting the benefit and remove them. And take that time to think. Think deeply, narrow, and go a mile deep. We lost my mom and my dad more recently. I have a brother and a sister, and I've become the storyteller of the family. Last Labor Day, my brother and sister decided we were going to go to Buena Vista, Colorado, and spend a weekend. My brother has a Jeep Wrangler, so he brought his Jeep up from Texas. My sister lives in Eureka, California, and of course I live in Janesville. So my brother drives up, the rest of us fly in, and we did some Jeep trails and stuff the first day. And my sister says, I want to go on a hike tomorrow. We're like, all right, we can go on a hike tomorrow. And I said, but I want to tell you a story first. This image was the fire we built that night. I told my brother and sister that about 15 years ago, my wife and I and our 3 boys went up Camelback Mountain with a guide in Tempe, Arizona. We went about a third of the way up. Everybody's doing pretty well, and the guide says it's time to take a break. We stop at a little piñon tree, which is pretty common in Arizona and New Mexico. And he's asking us, what do you see that's around that piñon tree that you need to be observant of? And it was our youngest, maybe because he was closest to the ground, and he says, there's a lot of rocks that look like hearts around that tree. And he goes, that's exactly right. So your task as we climb up and descend Camelback Mountain is to find a rock that looks like a heart. And when we come back, we're going to think of somebody who was a big impact on your life. And we're going to place that rock there and say a little message to them. So we climb up the mountain, and you'd be surprised how many rocks look like hearts. And I, the Sherpa of rocks, had pockets full of rocks. And it got heavier and heavier, so I decided I needed to distill this a little bit, do a little skew reduction. And we just kept skinning it down to make sure that we had the right rock for each one of the 5 of us. When we got back to the piñon tree, we placed our rock, we kept it to ourselves, who it was for, and our guide said, I promise you, whoever it was you were thinking about heard from you. So the next day, my brother and my sister and I, we took our hike, probably 3 or 4 miles, not too far for old people, and we looked for rocks. This was our last day on our little journey. And we set up a camera on a picnic table that was near one of the trails, and we held our rock proudly. And what I love to do, and I'm glad earlier we had you guys close your eyes, and I'm not going to feel so weird asking you, but I want you to think about someone who is important in your life. And I want you to close your eyes for 10 seconds, and I want you to think about them and how they impacted you, and tell them thanks. Now look, when we close your eyes, or you close your eyes, don't count to 10. I got that part. I really want you to think about this individual, this one individual, and tell them thanks. So you ready? Close your eyes. Okay, you can open your eyes. I promise you, whoever you were thinking about felt it in their heart. And you know what? It kind of feels good to just be quiet and think. Thank you, guys. I'm happy to take questions.
All right, Mark, thanks very much. Everyone, if you have a question, you can line up behind me, and you can prove that your card is, or if you're Tom, you don't need a card. First question comes from me. Maybe not your favorite SKU, but your favorite section of your stores.
I gotta be honest with you, I like going to sporting goods and looking at the fishing lures. And I have a small house on the Rock River, and I like to fish there, and I get a lot of catfish. I have been told I'm not supposed to eat very many of those, so I try to only eat 2 a summer. But I love to fish, and so I love to go down that aisle. Good question.
Tom Gale, thank you for being here. To give us an idea of just how large your stores are, when you open up a new store, how many semi-loads does it take to restock it?
Boy, this is going to be anecdotal because I don't know the real detail, but I'm going to guess each semi-load probably has, let's say, $200,000 worth of inventory, and we probably put in $3 million, so 60-ish. 60-ish, 53-foot semis to get a store started. Is that good? Is that a good answer? Sure. Yeah.
Here, which one should I ask, Jamie? My name is Fred Bursch. So you commented about the Mills Blain story that we hear frequently, and that's a local story. And certainly KKR is thinking beyond just dealing with one competitor when they're a New York firm, and the fleet retail industry happens everywhere. So one of my questions is, how have you been impacted by the new people, the Harbor Freight or Tractor Supply, Northern Tool, Home Depot, Menards, and how have you benefited from the loss of Montgomery Ward's, JCPenney, Sears, and things like that as the market has changed?
Yeah, maybe I'll address the second part first. One of the things that I think we have become is the department store as well as the farm channel store. And partly because we have such high standards in our buildings, and we're really toying and playing with pushing the envelope around fashion or trends in some of the categories. We're doing a lot more in Western with Ariat. Carhartt is giving us the full banter of their assortment, and we're doing, I'll say, softer colors for some of the women in our neighbors, as our neighbors. So that's helped us, I think. I think we're impacted by Harbor Freight and Northern Tool because they're a value option. And we absolutely see through a company called, or a service called Placer AI, where people might come to our store first, and then they go across the street and head over to Northern Tool or Harbor Freight. They don't sell the quality that we sell, and there's certainly a segment of population that needs to get a job done today, and for half price, maybe not a Milwaukee tool, unfortunately, they want to buy something that's an off-brand. So we have to pay attention to that, and we have to make sure we're paying attention to our opening price points. It's a small segment of our population that moves over there, 4 or 5%, but I think it's something that we have to pay attention to.
Hi, Mark. I'm Tom Lujak, and I was in one of your stores this weekend up in Eau Claire, Chippewa Falls, buying new muck boots for myself and my daughter, who runs a horse ranch up there. My question is sort of related to the products that I was looking at. You like every other company, depend both on domestically produced goods, but also foreign goods. What impact have the tariffs had on your business, and what do you see going forward in the next year?
Yep, good question. I mean, I think tariffs impacted pretty much every retailer. We are very fortunate that most of our imported merchandise goes through a different distributor channel, so they were absorbing a lot of the tariff costs. However, we saw inflation in a lot of our goods. We've had inflation since 2019 of around 3.3% on an annualized basis, which is pretty significant. And that's, quite honestly going to be difficult to sustain long-term because people's wages aren't going up that much. We made lots of planogram changes, meaning our assortment changes. So we do toys every year. Hopefully you've been to Toyland. And we had to make, I don't know, maybe 10 different planogram changes to remove some of the items that were coming in straight from China to make sure that we could provide an assortment that our neighbors could afford.
I guess the last question, you mentioned Toyland. When do you start planning for that?
January. So we like any good retailer, as soon as the season is over, we start to recap it and understand what worked, what didn't work. We've been very fortunate to have a strong relationship with Lego. Lego comes from mostly Mexico, and that's an incredibly fast-growing brand, along with other brands that we have in toys. But I think you will be very, very excited about how we continue to progress with Toyland. We have a great set of buyers in that space. They're doing some creative things, and it's differentiated from other mass retail. Thank you.
Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you all.